Next, we'll hear from Jeff Luse, a policy analyst and deputy editor at C3 Solutions, which focuses on clean energy policy solutions that work, and Sierra Quitiquit, a professional skier, climate activist, and CEO of Time for Better, a climate communications agency. Let's take a look. So Sierra, to start with you grew up in Park City, Utah, big skier, so snow is a huge part of your life, but you at the same time got sort of a front row seat to seeing the climate change. Talk about how that experience has impacted your activism.
Yeah, my community has been really affected by the loss of snowpack. For example, as a child, we had the World Cup, which brought millions of dollars to my community, and we lost the snow, and that event moved to Europe. And so we've seen a huge economic decline in my hometown of Park City, and that inspired me to reach out to my audience and any audience I could reach and speak about the world that's changing.
And who is your audience?
My background was as a professional skier. That was how my platform was built, and so I think sports enthusiasts. But those are people that care about the natural world and want to preserve our wonderful natural world. So I think those folks are inherently interested in leaning in on making the world a better place.
And Jeff, oftentimes you don't hear, the words Republican and conservative in the same sentence as environmentalism or climate change. Talk about your background in getting involved in this space as a conservative.
Yeah. Well, I think it started growing up in PA. It's very like oil and gas, obviously, so that employed my family. So I never quite viewed the natural gas industry as evil. They were employers, so it helped my community a lot. But then, as I started getting older, the news coverage started shifting a bit more on climate change, and obviously, when you're young, that's pretty alarming. It gets you involved. But then I kind of saw the solutions that were getting promoted were primarily from like progressive and left of center, and I didn't quite agree with them. So to me, it was just kind of like a bit of a no-brainer. Like I kind of viewed the world as needing to be cared for, but I also thought that my worldview and the issue sets that I believed in could do that. As it turns out, that's true. We've seen that with energy policy in the U.S. We've seen the free market at work, being able to, with natural gas, displace coal, and that led the U.S. to kind of lead the world in emissions reductions. So I think history and economics kind of shows us that, free market, right of center solutions work to take care of the environment, and they also have economic co-benefits. So it's, kind of a win-win.
And Sierra, what are you looking to get accomplished? What does the end game look like for you? Does it, have to do with obviously lowering pollution, or is there, what are some initiatives that you'd like to see implemented?
I think everyone should care about the environmental movement, and I think, we all have a stake in this game right now. We're amidst a health crisis, actually, infertility, mental health, endocrine disruption. All of these issues can be linked back to plastics and the fossil fuel industry and pollution. And so I think that my goal as a climate communicator is to getting more community in that movable middle out to act and vote on climate, because this is the decisive decade, and the most critical point right now is this is the decisive decade and the most critical point to act, and we all have a stake in this game if we want to create a better future for ourselves, our economy, and our children.
Jeff, you recently wrote a post in National Review talking about President Biden's initiatives to get more Americans or young Americans to plant more trees. And you said that's great, but it's not necessarily the root of the problem. We should be doing other things. What else should the Biden administration and Republican and Democratic officials and lawmakers be doing in that space?
Yeah. I think it all starts with, with climate policy. The solutions can't be worse than, with climate change, I should say, the solutions can't be worse than the problem. So I think that should be kind of top of mind for policymakers in the administration and on the Hill. They should be prioritizing solutions that, grow the economy, but also reduce emissions. So for instance, you could look at permitting reform. It takes more than 4.5 years for any energy project to get built in this country. With energy demand set to grow, like we need more energy, we're going to need more clean energy specifically, and more reliable energy. So like that's an obvious one. Nuclear energy, it's our safest and it's our cleanest source of power. And to their credit, the Biden administration has prioritized that. Republicans have as well, through funding for the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. Then there's the ADVANCE Act. So Congress has, and so has the Biden administration. They've been kind of pushing a few of these issues, but it really should focus, instead of a federal jobs program with the Climate Corps, we should be working on ways to unleash the private sector and unleash the market to address this problem, which would reap economic and environmental co-benefits.
So Sierra, you talked about health as being a major driving factor for people to care about climate and the environment. Jeff, you talked about the economic impact, jobs, the market, et cetera. Do you think that's the language that's needed to get people on both sides of the aisle to come together and say, okay, we want the same things ultimately, but we just might be going about it in a different way? Do you think it's the language that's really the roadblock here?
Yeah, I think we're living in a world that's really decisive, and there's a lot of fear, which drives hatred, and that's really unfortunate because actually we do all want the same thing. We want to breathe clean air. We want to drink clean water. We want to be able to power our homes affordably. And I think it was really nice to sit around the table today and all talk about solutions and agree on solutions. And I agree with so many things that you said. I think nuclear energy is a viable, clean energy solution. And I think that we need to bring a collaborative approach because climate change proposes the largest problem humanity's ever faced. And we need radical collaboration to make that happen and less finger pointing across the aisle.
Yeah, I think incorporating the language, and I think just more bipartisan roundtables like we just had. I learned a lot, and I hope some of my friends on maybe the left learned a lot. But yeah, I think we want a lot of the same things. There's definitely going to have to be some give and take. I think that people maybe just need to accept that. But we can ultimately get to what we want, which is a cleaner environment, a more robust economy. Yeah.
Do you guys think the future of climate and environmental activism, whether it's on the left or the right, lies with Gen Z? I mean, this seems to be a group of young people who don't necessarily put as much onus on a political label. So maybe that means there's more opportunity for them to work together.
I mean, Gen Z isn't holding political office right now, so we can, create the rally cry and put leverage on our politicians, but the responsibility lies in those in office to create action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think activism is great. I think grassroots activism is great, but I think our generation also needs to kind of point to the economic co-benefits of the solutions that we want. As Sierra said, none of us are really holding office, and in order to communicate to the policymakers and lawmakers, we have to show that what we want isn't going to wreck our economic status and our economic strength. So I think it is a good blend of we need a lot of grassroots activism, but we also need grass tops policy and economic analysis and things of that nature. And I think I'm hopeful that our generation can do that. I really am.
Yeah, and finally, how do you communicate with those policymakers that are older than Gen Z? I mean, I understand that's a pretty wide-ranging question, but how do you reach them?
Yeah, it's kind of what I said before. There's certainly a political pressure telling these lawmakers that the younger generations care about it, but it's also kind of showing that, especially with right of center conservative lawmakers, that addressing climate change or engaging in the issue isn't, an automatic bend to Al Gore. It's not saying we don't love capitalism. So I think for us, it's been showing the economic and environmental co-benefits of good climate policy. We've done a report called Free Economies or Clean Economies. In that report, we show that free economies are twice as clean as unfree economies. So I think that's hugely important, that we can have environmental progress, but environmental progress goes hand in hand with economic progress as well. So a lot of the solutions that we want, nuclear energy, permitting reform, green energy even, like those provide jobs. It helps maintain energy security. It also gives American leadership in the world, which I think is something that, lawmakers on Capitol Hill really, really value.
I think it's easy in this day and age to say my actions, my vote, my opinion doesn't matter, and that's a really dangerous place to sit. And so I would encourage all young people out there to get involved and to realize that they have a really important voice and a stake in the claim in the future of our world. And so picking up the phone and dialing your representatives, sending emails, voting, getting smart about what's on the ballot, this is all really, really critical. And if you're deciding to sit that out and be a passerby, then you're forfeiting your stake in the future. And so I think it's really important that we all lean in this moment and we all help co-create and collaborate in the world that we want to live in.
Excellent. Well, Sierra and Jeff, I think that does it for us. Thank you so much for
much.
taking part in this. I appreciate it. Thanks again to Jeff and Sierra. Now back over to former Governor Schwarzenegger for some final thoughts.
I know that the Democrats would love to up the renewable energy in America. Their wish is to increase it by 100%. So to go from 20% to 40%. Well, the Republicans would love nothing more than to have nuclear power. Well, we also know that that's the cleanest form of energy. So there's a renewable energy that's the clean form of energy. There's nuclear power that's the clean form of energy.